Could a man who was rejected from an ordinary job create something that would one day become a synonym for style, beauty, victory, and speed? The answer to that question is the story of Enzo Ferrari. Enzo Ferrari was born in Modena, Italy, but here's the strange part. He actually had two birth dates. The official one was February 20th, 1898, but Enzo himself always claimed he was born on February 18th of the same year. Why? Because, according to him, the snowstorm on the day he was born was so severe that his parents could only reach the local office 2 days later to register his birth. Enzo's father was Alfredo Ferrari, and his mother was Adalgisa Bisbini. They had two children, Enzo and his older brother Alfredo, who was named after their father. Enzo's father, just like his grandfather, worked as a grocer. He built a small workshop inside the family home, and that workshop became the way he supported the family. Years later, Enzo would remember those childhood days and say that the main sound of his early life, the sound he fell asleep to and woke up to, was the sound of a hammer striking metal. As a child, Enzo, like many of you, did not enjoy studying. He dreamed of a bright and exciting life. At one point, he wanted to become an opera singer, and at another, he dreamed of becoming a sports journalist. To be honest, the first option was a problem because Enzo had neither the voice nor the ear for singing. Journalism, on the other hand, might actually have worked out, but fate had very different plans for him. One day, his father took him to a car race, and Enzo was instantly fascinated. The victory of Felice Nazzaro inspired him so deeply that he decided right there that one day he would become a racing driver. But not long after that, tragedy struck. As Enzo was approaching the end of school, he was forced to leave before finishing because his father died, and that was not the end of it. Soon after, his brother also passed away. And then, on top of everything else, World War I began, and young Enzo was immediately drafted. This was an incredibly difficult period of his life, but Enzo refused to give up. If he gave up now, then all the hopes his father and brother had placed in him would be wasted, and his mother would be left completely alone. Enzo served in the 3rd Artillery Regiment, and it was there that his dream began to move a little closer, because he was assigned to supervise machinery, and to be fair, he was very good at it. After the war, he could think of only one thing: becoming the best at what he did. But just when he was starting to get back on his feet, he was hit by yet another brutal blow. He contracted the Spanish flu, the same disease that had killed his father and brother 2 years earlier. Enzo's condition became so severe that the nurses believed he would die any day and barely paid attention to him. But young Enzo remembered that his mother and his dream were waiting for him back home, and that thought alone was enough to keep him from giving up. Somehow he survived. After demobilization, he had nothing. The family business had collapsed, his health was weak, and he had no money. But by that point, hardship could no longer scare him. He searched for work and eventually tried to get a job at Fiat, but when he showed up, he was harshly rejected. And at that moment, he had no idea that this rejection would become one of the most ironic moments in automotive history. In the end, he found work as a test driver at CMN, a small company that converted used truck chassis into passenger cars. Later, he finally became a racing driver, and in 1919, at the Parma Poggio di Berceto hill climb, he finished in 4th place driving a car from the same CMN factory. Sometime later, Enzo joined the racing division of Alfa Romeo as a driver, and a few years later he won the Coppa Acerbo in Pescara. That victory opened the door to much more prestigious competitions. A year later, his idol Antonio Ascari died, and after that, as Enzo himself admitted, he continued racing only half-heartedly. A few years later, after the birth of his son Dino, Enzo began seriously thinking about what to do next. The spark that racing once gave him was no longer there. By then, he had saved enough money to live comfortably, but he realized something important. It still wasn't enough. He wanted more. So he decided to step away from racing and dedicate himself to something he loved even more than the races themselves, the cars, their construction, their mechanics. He loved studying them, finding flaws and fixing weaknesses. He wanted to push cars as close to perfection as possible. So, after gathering all the money he had and borrowing even more from colleagues and friends, he bought land, started building a workshop for engines and automobiles, and founded his own team. Scuderia Ferrari, Ferrari Stable. At first, this team operated as the racing arm of Alfa Romeo, and thanks to powerful cars and talented drivers, it quickly became successful. Somewhere around that time, the Ferrari logo first appeared on the team's cars, and the story behind it is much deeper than most people realize. In 1923, Enzo won a race in Ravenna. After that victory, he met the parents of Francesco Baracca, one of Italy's most famous World War I fighter aces and a national hero. Baracca's mother told Enzo, "Take my son's horse, it will bring you luck." Enzo did not use the symbol immediately, but later it would become the famous Ferrari emblem. And the logo itself was not random at all. The yellow background represented the city of Modena, Enzo's hometown. Soon after the Ferrari 125S appeared, new cars began to follow, and Ferrari started doing more than simply participating in races. It was now making a real statement across Europe. And at that moment, one thing became clear. Ferrari was not just a lucky accident. The real strength of Ferrari was that its cars were never built as toys for the rich. They were built as machines for victory. The company kept growing, kept winning, and race after race, Ferrari's name became more and more feared. Then, in 1962, a tractor manufacturer named Ferruccio Lamborghini came to Ferrari. Yes, you heard that right. Lamborghini originally began with tractors. At the time of his visit, Ferruccio was actually a huge Ferrari fan. He owned 6 of them, and he arrived in one of his own Ferraris. The purpose of his visit was to discuss working with Ferrari. According to one version of the story, Ferruccio pointed out that all of the Ferraris in his garage had the same problem, the clutch. But Enzo Ferrari had no interest in hearing criticism about his cars from some tractor maker, and he rudely dismissed him. That may have been one of Enzo's biggest mistakes, because Ferruccio left furious, decided to build his own supercars, and went on to become Ferrari's greatest rival. He even managed to lure away some of Ferrari's best engineers. But the story of Lamborghini is a story for another video. Enzo Ferrari died on August 14, 1988, at the age of 90. At his own request, the announcement of his death was delayed by 2 days, a symbolic gesture to compensate for the late registration of his birth. The last car produced during his lifetime was the legendary Ferrari F40, an incredibly advanced machine for its time. And for many people, it remains one of the purest Ferraris ever made. Despite being famous, talented, and extremely wealthy, Enzo was also a surprisingly private and modest man. He rarely gave interviews and almost never left Modena or Maranello, except for the annual Italian Grand Prix in Monza near Milan. In fact, the only time he ever went abroad was a trip to Paris in 1982 to help resolve the conflict between FISA and FOCA. He also never flew on an airplane, never traveled to Rome, and never even used an elevator. And this is where Ferrari faced its greatest test of all. Could the company survive the man who had been its very heart? During Enzo's lifetime, Fiat had already purchased part of Ferrari, and after his death, control over the company only became stronger. That meant one thing: Ferrari could no longer exist only as the small world of one obsessed founder. It now had to learn how to become a truly large company without losing its soul. And most importantly, Ferrari succeeded. Because instead of turning into just another luxury car manufacturer, the brand managed to preserve the things that made it legendary in the first place: character, aggression, beauty, and the feeling that these machines were not just cars, but something almost alive. Some of the best Ferraris ever made came after Enzo's death, proving that the company continued to evolve even after losing its creator. Ferrari Enzo became the only Ferrari named entirely in honor of the man himself. Ferrari F50 was overshadowed by the F40, but many people still believe it is one of the most underrated Ferraris ever built. And then came LaFerrari, the hypercar of a new era. Maybe the most ironic part of this entire story is that the man who was once rejected from an ordinary job ended up creating a name that the entire world knows today. And that is how Enzo Ferrari turned rejection, pain, obsession, and relentless ambition into one of the greatest legends the automotive world has ever seen.